that's kind of why I wanted to ask after if you had any advice as far as like what you would see as pitfalls for that sort of thing, where you think it would stay.
The first thing is that the backdrop, although you never really touch it, just like the backdrop in a stage, you never really touch it, but still its content really is supposed to be imbuing all of the more foregrounded, tangible aspects of play. And so, therefore, messing with it, there are aspects of it whose integrity should not be touched. Right? I mean, it depends. How freewheeling do you want this comic book to be? Do you suddenly want time and space to crack open and everybody's mirror image, from the evil universe is now, continuous with ours? Or do you want it, suddenly revealed, in the classic sort of 80s fantasy conspiracy thing that, the real humans left when spaceflight was first, worked on in the 60s, the real humans all left Earth and were the ones, we're the robots who were left behind to replace them or some shit like that. I mean, is that the kind of thing that you're trying to disallow is just simply in terms of extremity or craziness? Or, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, have them change the backdrop, but you should recognize that that you need a real backdrop that nobody changes.
Yeah.
So that those changes that they can make are, remain tolerable / enjoyable. You're not letting anybody burn anything down that we were using. We were using that. You shouldn't change that. We were using that the way it was. So I think what I'm trying to say is that certainly, unless you want to go to just basic collaborative storytelling where everybody has to vet everything they say against what everybody else thinks, which is insane.
Yeah.
Unless you want to do that, then yeah, you need some kind of rule for what on earth you do with your privilege of the moment to alter the setting.
Right.
And remember, I'm not talking about altering very concrete things of the immediate location they were in or the people they interacted with directly. That those would be altered through the ordinary course of events is not hard to understand.
Yeah.
You're talking about actually changing. Can you give me an example of a change to the setting that?
So, like one of the ethical binaries is the many versus the few, and so maybe a hero who had one of their primary ethics was the many, and they would have like a background obligation to a community center that they were trying to help keep ground, and then overplay they would gain. Either they would gain the privilege or they would gain some sort of currency that would allow them to say, okay, an anonymous benefactor gives money to the community center, helping the community center to flourish, inspired by my acts, or just, generally from the goodwill imbued by, like, these ethics becoming more in the foreground or something like that. I don't really want there to be like necessarily a direct one-to-one, like the hero did this, so this thing happens, but generally they enact their ethics upon the world and things happen because of it.
Well, first of all, what you're really talking about are aspects of the character's own sheet.
That's kind of what I'm thinking it might be, yeah.
In which case, that's fine. I mean, it's sort of it's a little bit, if you think of the character sheet as not just being the physiology and physical space of the character by themselves, but instead being a web of things that are directly connected to them. What in Primetime Adventures, Matt put it very nicely, that each character had their own private set in addition to the more generalized sets or multiple character use sets. That and so the same thing goes with relationships, the same thing goes with any number of other things, that the characters have things about them that extend off of their characters' own bodies, but nevertheless belong to that character and to a great extent to that player anyway.
Right.
So being able to change those really isn't that shocking.
Right.
And having them actually be put, it doesn't mean they're inviolate. I mean, they could be put at risk in some particular scenario, or they might not. But the idea that the players in the course of play would have some kind of mechanical means by which to make those things stronger, better, different, larger, whatever, is real easy. I mean, this goes back to Champions. I mean, when you could spend points on locations and build them with points.
Right.
And if you wanted it to be bigger, or you wanted to give it, stronger walls or whatever, you just spent more points.
Right.
So I'm not too horrified or shocked by that idea. I think the use of the word setting is maybe could throw a person into some distress, because again, setting usually refers indiscriminately to anything external to the character, and therefore the difference between situational stuff that the character can and has touched and backdrop stuff which nobody really ever gets to touch. Not because it's sacred, but because it is bigger and vaster and more influencing of everything else than anything that they can just go up and touch. So what I'm saying is that when you say you can alter the setting, instantly somebody can get the heebie-jeebies and say, well, wait a minute, can my character alter the past? I don't want my players to alter my campaign's past. I don't want my players to suddenly, bring up a volcano. That's my job.
Right.
And so by using the word setting, because it has been used to mean too much, like the essay says, that's what creates kind of that itchy feeling. Or people can have the reverse idea, tell players, hey, you can alter the setting. They'll overextend the meaning of that word so that it includes anything and everything external to the character, and all of a sudden, there's who knows what happening anywhere, all around. So, but if you use the phrasing properly and talk about things that are designated as pieces of the character, even if they're external to the character physically, then nobody has any problem with saying, oh yeah, I want my community center to be, wealthier or safer. I'll spend a few more points on it, or I'll add a statement to the description, or whatever it is that the mechanics permit them to do.
So what if in the instance of like something that wasn't necessarily an obligation to the character specifically? So there's also a binary order versus autonomy, and maybe an autonomy character would say, I purchased that given the situation stuff that we found out that the mayor is this this meta-human supremacist asshole, and we exposed him. I now am going to purchase the fact that there are protests and riots happening, given what we've discovered. And that's not necessarily like on the sheet, but I do think that like I obviously want to very narrowly define what is changeable by the players given these mechanics.
Easily enough. I mean, under autonomy, you could say, public dissent is actually within the purview of that player to alter because they've got that access.
Okay. I
mean, that doesn't seem very hard either. With the many versus the few, then you're talking about benefits to individuals, especially in a trade-off-y kind of way. For order versus autonomy, you're talking about the behavior of people, en masse.
I like the idea of different questions for different ethics. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, or different spheres of what you can influence based on your ethics axes. Praxis ethics axes.
That's
Sorry.
Good. No,
clearly it's been a long day. If we so does that help a little bit? I mean, I think I found the sort of mechanical moment there and reference point on the sheet that allows you to have people hit the aspects of how we play.
Yeah. Yeah, I came to you knowing kind of like roughly what I wanted, but I felt like talking with somebody who knew a lot more about it would help me to clarify my thinking, and it has. So
Excellent.
I think
So I think that sounds like fun. The other aspect of that too is that everybody can draw upon those changes just to color up what's going on. Somebody says, I zoomed. Well, anybody. I mean, as I zoom through the Manhattan city blocks, buildings to either side of me as I power fly my way along, my character, who dislikes yours, will buzz the protesters just to be annoying.
Right.
Stuff like that. I mean, I'm referencing the protesters because you have brought them into... You see, what you're doing is not changing the setting. You're activating aspects of the backdrop to enter the situations or be used in situations. That's the way to look at it from the theoretical standpoint.